Welcome, everybody, to episode number 34 of Into the Fire, coming to you live from the great city of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm so happy to have everybody here. Hopefully, everybody has had a great Christmas and holiday season. And yes, I did say the word Christmas. I got reprimanded by somebody. I mean, if you look behind me, you can tell I'm into Christmas. My wife's into Christmas. I don't have any problem saying the word Christmas. I just happen to say happy holidays to everybody because Christmas had passed and now we have a number of holidays coming our way in the future. So it's good to have everybody here. Like I said, I hope everybody had a great holiday season. I'm gonna mention this, that January the 31st, I'm going to be speaking at the United States Marshals Museum in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Amanda, if you don't mind throwing that up, I'm going to be speaking there. It's going to be from 5 to 8. 5 to 6 is actually going to be kind of a meet and greet, and we'll hang out. Probably there's drinks. I don't know what they got going on there. And then from it's actually from 6 to 8 p.m., they're going to have me speaking, and it'll be a lot of fun. It's one of the rare moments that I actually get to speak to the public. And if you've ever been to you have to be 18 and over. That's the one thing. And if you come to this thing, I talk about real life murder. So if Amanda, it's going to be in your Facebook deal. It came through on a message, I think, but if you didn't get it, it's not a big deal. I'll send you something, but I will update people on my Instagram and Facebook and so forth. I've got a flyer that I'll send out. I think they're charging $10 a person for this thing. So, but if you're in the vicinity of, and it's going to the museum, it's going to a really good cause. So if you're in the vicinity of Fort Smith, Arkansas, which is right on the border of Oklahoma on I-40, then, think about going. I think you'd have a great time. Tonight, we've got an incredibly qualified guest. I mean, of all of my guests that I've had on this show, I have to say, I don't ever put anybody on that's like a filler guest that I just needed somebody in a pinch and I'm just sticking somebody on there just to have them on there. But this guy is somebody that is on a whole nother galaxy as far as guest. I didn't really know who he was. I happened to find him on LinkedIn, and I was looking around and I came across him and I started reading his stuff, and I was like, man, this guy'd be an interesting guy to talk to. So he reached out to me. We spoke on the phone, and within 1 minute, I was just amazed at this guy's qualifications. He's somebody that I have no doubt in the world that you guys you're gonna love. Just to kind of tell you a little bit about him. He's a I'm going to say world-renowned fire death investigator who specializes in serial arson. He's worked as an officer, a detective, an undercover operator, a bomb technician, an arson investigator, which, by the way, that's interesting to me. And I'm going to ask him about that because usually arson investigators, they're firefighters that have attended through a fire academy, but he retired from Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office. Not to mention the fact this guy's a teacher. He's an author of multiple books and a professional, like I said before, a professional arson profiler. Ed has investigated over 2,100 arson cases and arrested over 300 people for arson-related offenses. In addition to that, he has testified as an expert in fire and arson on over 100 cases and has been involved in over 60 fatal fire investigations and 46 serial arson cases. And I didn't even mention the mountain of awards that Ed has received. It's insane. And he is somebody that definitely I look up to already. I mean, for sure. This guy's somebody I definitely want on my stable of people that I can reach out to. In addition to that, he has been featured and or consulted with Primetime Live, 2020, Good Morning America, NCIS, CSI Miami, and many, many more. So I'd like to welcome a true legend in the world, and he's going to downplay it, but he's a true legend in the world of criminal justice, no doubt. Welcome to Ed Nordskog. How you doing, buddy?
Thanks, Jason. Good to be in Tulsa.
Oh my gosh, it's great to have you here. You actually live in, I don't think it's a big deal to say that you live in an area very close to where I went to school when I was a kid. I grew up in Canyon Country, and that's just a stone's throw away from Newhall. And there was a real famous incident that my dad was a California highway patrolman, and there was an incident that he used to tell me about, the Newhall shootout, that 4 rookie California highway patrolmen were tragically murdered in 1971. I'm sure you're aware of it since you live in that area. But
yeah, it's right down the road from my house. Yes.
So welcome. I'm really looking forward to tonight. Tell us a little bit about how you even got on this path. I mean, I know that you started out like in Joseph Wamba, and I'm a fan as well, actually. Although I got the Choir Boys, but the book that I read when I was a kid was The Onion Field, and that's what really got me kind of hooked on. I was also wanting to be a police officer from that. But tell us your start, your journey.
Well, it's funny you brought up that book because Joseph Wamba recruited me too, not personally, but he wrote a book, and when I was 12 years old, I read it. I grew up in Minnesota and went to college there and did all of that, and I came out to California in the military. But I read my first Joseph Wamba book when I was 12 years old, and from that point on, I was going to go to Los Angeles and become a cop, and because of his books. And then, of course, I started watching the TV shows of the day. This was, I'm dating myself, but it was Starsky and Hutch and Police Story and things like that, and even Chips. And that solidified my mindset that I was going to end up somewhere in California as a cop. And that's what I did. So I've never grown up. I'm still doing it. And even though I retired from the Los Angeles Sheriff's about 5 years ago now, I still do just as much work. I do a lot of case consulting, cold case work, a lot of work for prosecutors, homicide units, and coroners. So I'm still in the game, and it's been a long time, but I like doing it. So, and it's the only thing in the world I was ever good at. So I guess I'll keep doing it till I'm done.
Now, you worked at a variety of assignments as a cop with the LA County Sheriff's Office, and they've got what, 7,000 or 8,000 deputies roughly. It's a huge department, right?
Yeah, I think we're sitting at about 8,500 right now, deputies. They're trying to get it up over 10,000. I don't think they can recruit fast enough,
right?
Like all police agencies. But I started with LA Sheriffs like everybody else. I was recruited out of the military base, out of the Camp Pendleton. The sheriffs recruited people back in the 80s off military bases, and like everybody else, went to an academy, went to a jail had to work in a jail for a couple of years, and then went out to work patrol. And I worked uniform patrol in the Compton area, which at the time that I was there was probably the most violent area in the entire United States. Yeah. So it was a good time. And because it was so busy, I made detective in a year and a half probably.
Man, that's crazy.
And I spent the next 33 years as a detective.
Wow. That's unheard of, actually. So you must have been really turning some heads. My dad worked out of West LA, so he spent some time, and I know he probably ventured down to Compton. Compton's South Central, isn't it? Kind of in that vicinity.
Yes.
Yeah. So and then from there, you wanted to be homicide. That was kind of your main goal, right? My
goal was like everybody else, was to be a homicide detective. And on our department, it's a huge department, as you mentioned, around 9,000 people. If you want to stay doing police work, you either end up going to the SWAT team or to a headquarters detective job. And the two senior jobs were the arson bomb unit or the homicide unit. And I'd never heard of the arson bomb unit, so I was going to be a homicide detective. And I did several years undercover work, probably 8 years undercover work, and then worked major narcotics. Eventually got selected the same day for both units, and which was pretty weird, both the arson bomb and the homicide unit, and ended up picking up the arson unit. I had no interest in it whatsoever, couldn't have cared less. All I knew is it was the highest paid job on the department, so that was a bonus. You had a take-home car, which is, if you live in LA, that's worth a lot of money. And you didn't have much supervision, so that was me. Perfect. And that's all I needed.
That's kind of a big deal.
And it ended up being really interesting. The arson part of it was way more interesting than the bomb part of it. So you mentioned something earlier that a lot of people don't understand in the United States, that the arson units are probably 90% firefighters across this country, and the same in Canada. 90% of your arson investigators are actually firefighters. We're weird in LA. It's the police that are the arson investigators. Several large sheriff departments in Southern California do it the same way. San Diego and San Bernardino and Riverside, those big agencies, the police officers are actually the arson investigators.
Yeah, I'd
It
never
worked
heard of
out
that.
really well. It worked out really well for us, and we're a high volume agency. We would get 20, 25, 30 fires a day. And so you got to practice a lot and get really, really good, hopefully, because you're going to get another bunch tomorrow if you didn't get today's right. So,
Yeah. So do you like, you know, I'm sure you're out of substations and so forth, but I mean, in essence, that's just kind of, I've never heard of that where you didn't have where you weren't a firefighter. Do you think that's good, bad, or is it more of a challenge for you because you're kind of learning ground up? I mean, you don't have a lot of the fire experience, I wouldn't think.
well, that's a great point. And here's the thing, and it's talked about a lot in our industry. When I say our industry, I mean the arson industry. There's a reason that arson is the least solved crime. It's even your most mediocre homicide detectives solve 50% or better homicides. I mean, they do 40 to 50%, even in the worst areas, the least funded, the busiest areas. You know, homicide, they still solve over close to 50% or higher. Across the world, but especially in North America, the solve rate for arsons is about 2%.
Really?
And that's
2%.
horrendous.
Even with the technology.
My agency averaged about 14 or 15%. Well, I still thought that was embarrassingly bad, but when I compared it to other big agencies, I was shocked at their solve rate. And there's a lot into the equation, and I'm kind of unfiltered, but the main reason is there's two major problems. You have the fire scene, which is a super technical investigation. And if you get past that and figure out what happened, now you have to start a criminal investigation.
Mm-hmm.
At LA Sheriff's, you couldn't even apply to our unit unless you were a criminal investigator for at least 5 years. So you had to have already been a well-known, well-respected investigator before you even got the job. So once we get on the arson bomb unit, we already know how to be detectives. They just need to teach us the science of fire and basically how to take apart a bomb, because that's the other part of our job. So I thought it was easier to train a detective to be to learn fire scenes than take a professional firefighter, which is what it goes on in most of the jurisdictions. Somebody who's been putting out fires for 20 years gets really good at it. They've been rescuing people and putting out fires, and now they want to be an arson investigator. And most fire agencies send them to about a 3-week class. And it's the most technical investigation there is by far. Mm-hmm. And now these poor guys are trying to learn how to be police detectives at the same time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go well a lot of the time. These guys really struggle with criminal investigation.
Well, I can tell you that, I mean, I would assume that it's like our department. You know, we these guys that actually get to become an arson investigator, where we're at, they're of the rank of captain at that point, and they get selected for that, and then I get to see them because they look absolutely miserable because they're in a police academy, much older. Right. I'm sure they're not getting treated bad, but they don't look like they're just having a great time. And then they're having to go through that police academy because, in essence, all arson investigators, I would assume, have law enforcement arrest authority to be able to do that kind of a job, just like a cop. You know?
No, they don't.
Oh, they don't. Okay, well, I'm learning all kinds of things.
So it's very much, if you know how the coroners work in the United States and Canada, the arson investigation works exactly the same way. It's up to the whim of the fire chief or fire marshal whether his people have police powers? Whether they get a lot of training or no training? There's no real standard. That's one of the main reasons that there's problems with arson investigation. The guys are willing to do it. I say the guys, the investigators really want to do it. They want to learn this job. They don't always have the funding and backing by fire chiefs, because traditionally fire chiefs have not really loved their arson units, and they believe, fire chiefs traditionally think, well, cops should be cops and firefighters are firefighters, and never the two shall mix. And it's that, unfortunately, the arson business is, you have to be both. You have to be equally both. So it's a very complicated business, and I'm not going to solve it in my lifetime. And I've talked about it in several of my books, the problems with arson investigation. A lot of them lie with the head of agency, just not wanting to support something he doesn't understand. So,
well, let me ask you this, because there was we talked about this beforehand, and Ed is probably going to be willing to come on, hopefully, in the future. And there's such a huge area with respect to his job. And there's two main areas I think that we kind of pointed out. One of them was fire death investigation, and then the other one was serial arsonist. And he told me you probably should choose one or the other, because they're just massive amount to talk about on either one of them. So we chose for tonight, we're going to talk about fire death investigation. And I can tell you, Ed, from my experience, I've dealt with a few of them. I've dealt with a few. I've always, in my brain, I've always thought, well, you already know what kind of training we've had with respect to fire death. I'm sure you could pick it out, which is virtually none. And I've always said the whole time that I've actually mentioned it to the fire arson investigators with the Tulsa Fire Department that, hey, get me some bunker gear, issue it to me, and call me out when you get a fire death, just to let me watch what you guys are doing on a fire death, so I can kind of get an idea. I just want to learn. I'm not trying to. I know I'm not going to be an arson investigator, but I just want to learn what it is that you're looking at on these bodies and stuff, because in some instances these guys have been to some training, and we talked about it earlier. That San Luis Obispo fire training, which is, they actually burn real bodies there. I think they do. That's what I've heard.
Yes, they do.
And then there's one that you'd recommended to me, which was in Texas, which does kind of, they copied what San Luis Obispo is doing. But my point is that let's talk about fire death here, because I don't know much about it, but it's an area to me as a homicide detective, and I've been doing this for 15 plus years. I'm fascinated with fire death, just because it's the one area that I kind of want to I want to know a bunch in. And that's the one area that attracts me. I'm not interested in the gang murders and that kind of stuff. I want to know a lot about fire death, because they're incredibly challenging. So tell us a little bit about what's the most challenging things for those types of cases.
Okay, so that's a great point, because that's what I teach around the country is fire death investigation. First of all, there's three entities that are involved in investigating a fire death. You have, most states, a homicide investigator goes, and then of course a fire investigator goes, usually from the fire department. And then a coroner's person will go. Whatever your system, medical examiner or coroner, they'll typically send somebody there, obviously, to collect the body. Historically, that's been done as three separate investigations. And the person that's left holding the bag is the homicide detective, because they're not scene investigators as far as a fire death scene, like they are on any other murder or death. So you're kind of beholden, you in the pocket of the fire investigator. You have to accept what they say, and the coroner investigator. Now, when I get cold cases and I get cases that are unsolved a lot that I help with, it's usually because one of those three investigators, the homicide, the coroner, or the fire investigator, is not talking to the other ones and not telling them what they're doing, because everything one investigator does affects or alters what the other investigator sees. And so the best situation is, if you have a deceased person in a house fire, Go there, wait till all three people are there, coroner, fire, and homicide. Stop and talk to each other for 10 seconds at least, and decide what you're going to do and in what order you're going to do it in. Because there's actually numerous tasks to be accomplished. And if you do the task out of sequence or wrongly, you're going to lose somebody else's evidence. Maybe the coroner's looking for something in the scene. The arson person is certainly looking for arson-related items. The job of the fire investigators, simple on paper, we have to figure out where the fire started and what caused the fire. It's extraordinarily complicated. The job of all three is then to decide, why did this person not escape the fire? Because in modern North America, fire deaths are actually quite rare. Although they happen every day, they're not common. It is not common for someone to die in a fire. It's not normal. It's abnormal, if not suspicious. Usually there's very good reasons why they die in a fire, but you have to find those in the scene. So my job with a homicide detective standing next to me would to explain to him what I'm looking for about why did these people not escape this scene? You know, what caused them to perish in this fire? And usually it's related to two big things. It's their health and their lifestyle. And all people like you and I do when we go to scenes like this is document both the health and lifestyle. Our best weapons at these scenes are, of course, cameras and notepads. And then at some point we'll start to dig out the scene and do an archaeological dig, if you will, and delayer the scene and get down to the floor and figure out and put everything back in the scene and figure out what happened here. And if we put a lot of work in there and it's labor intensive, we're going to figure that out in a house fire quite often. In a car fire, a little more difficult. Outside, in a non-traditional environment, a little more difficult. But
well, car murders are more difficult to me. What's more difficult in the sense that you're thinking about? Is it because they burn hotter or what? Because I've seen some cars, man, that are just like melted into the ground. You know?
Yeah, and so your question's pretty good. We love it when guys like you bring up stuff like that. Did it burn hotter? A lot of people believe that gasoline burns hotter than newspaper. It does not. Fire is fire. It all burns the same temperature, no matter what's burning. Sometimes it burns a little bit faster because of the oxygen that's there, and cars have more fuel around a smaller area and more rapidly burning fuel, but it all burns the same temperature. And I don't want to get too technical because everybody will fall asleep, but we have to sit and explain what you're seeing at the scene and why you're seeing it. And that's one of the biggest things, that your arson investigator has to have a lot of training, what happens in fires, and then especially in a fatality scene, what happens to the human body in a fire. And everything you see after the fire, the body was different before the fire. And it moved, it'll move in the fire, it'll be deceased and moved. And so we have to get around a lot of issues like that. And by the way, the firefighters putting out the fire change the scene every time. We can't help that. That's just the way it is. We have to interpret all those changes and not read bad information into those things. So we do, those scenes are actually quite difficult and very labor intensive.
So as a detective that virtually has gotten in no real formal training, but I'm interested, and I heard you on another deal talk about how there is a motherload of free training available, which I'm eager to hear about that, as far as where to go to get that free training for first responders, you know, because that's if people don't tell you where the, you know, I never even knew that existed. So I'm excited to hear about that. But so what, as a homicide detective for me, what would you like to see from me when I show up at the scene? Probably shutting my mouth and listening.
No, what I want to see is an open mind, because you're already going to get poisoned. You've heard all the modern investigative phrases like expectation bias and things like that. You're going to typically arrive at the scene usually before the arson investigator, and you're going to talk to a fire chief, a fire captain, somebody in charge, and they're going to tell you stuff. And I always tell the homicide guys, because I speak at all the homicide schools in the American West, I say, listen to the whatever fire official's in charge, listen to them, be polite, write it down, and then forget about it because it's a 50% chance they're wrong. And a rookie patrol officer would have just as much luck guessing what happened here as some fire chiefs. Not all, but some. And just tell them, okay, chief, I heard what you said. Now we're going to start our investigation. And sometimes you have to get past personalities, because sometimes the fire official will go, I just told you what happened. And say, well, I went to a school once, or I listened to some guy once, and he said, this is going to take hours. If you think this is going to be done in 10 minutes, you're in the wrong place. It's not. It's going to take hours at least. If you have a mass casualty event with 10 people deceased or whatever, you might be there for a week. It's not simple. It's not easy. And you only have, and I tell everybody, you only have one chance at this scene. If you do it wrong the first time, it's wrong forever.
Yeah.
And that's how cases become unsolved and cold cases, because somebody rushed at the scene or just accepted information without checking it, without verifying it. So when you go, Jason, to a scene, you're the homicide detective. You're not supposed to do my job, and I'm not supposed to do yours. We kind of have to understand each other's jobs, but we work side by side and we walk our way through it piece by piece. And if I tell you something, make me prove it. And say, well, I think this happened over here. And you'll say, why? Why do you think that? And we go through this over and over. And you sit there for hours with your fellow investigators, walking slowly through scenes and rebuilding the scene. And more often than not, if you did it right, the truth will come out. And that's what you want. You want the truth. And but the big thing is people rush to an easy answer because it's a lot of hard work. For instance, behind your right shoulder, you got a Christmas tree. And you're going to hear in the newspaper, if anybody still reads the newspaper, TV, a Christmas tree fire, right? And then you're going to get that warning from some sober fire chief. You got to turn off, you throw out those live Christmas trees after Christmas, or keep them watered. But what nobody understands is Christmas trees are not an ignition source. They will not burst into flames by themselves. They need to be lit on fire. They're a piece of fuel. Everything in the arson world is fuel to us. In some fuel, if it easily ignites, that's a volatile fuel. If it doesn't easily ignite, that's more stable. So a Christmas tree a live Christmas tree is a highly volatile fuel. And it just takes somebody to stare at it hard for it to burst into flames sometimes. And so we have to figure out what started the Christmas tree on fire. And it's actually not that simple. It's just a big piece of fuel to us that burns really quickly, and then everything else burning in the house and causes a lot of fatalities. But really, the problem is not how big the fire got, but what started the Christmas tree on fire.
Okay. So, and there's a lot of things that you can look at forensically that might tell you where the origin of the fire, where it started. Isn't there like lines of, I'm going to say the word wrong, I'm sure, but isn't it there's like a smoke? You kind of take that. I'm probably saying something really stupid, aren't I?
No, it's same demarcation. You'll be right.
Well, that's what I was thinking about. Marcation. Yeah, that demarcation.
You were about to say line of demarcation.
That's what I was going to say, but it's kind of like that, and it points you to the origin of where the fire is, right? And you can see it on the walls. Sometimes
fires create patterns. They take away things. They take away material when it's consumed in the fire, but then it's immediately deposited back in the scene in the form of soot and smoke. So it's consuming something, that's one pattern, a consumption pattern, and then it's depositing something, which is smoke and soot, after it burns. That creates different patterns. I'm trying to keep it that simple because it's super technical.
Oh, I know. I know.
And the biggest factor in any structure is how the air is flowing in the structure. And that tells you where your patterns are going to build and all this stuff. And so it's a super complicated thing, and the arson investigators, they read the patterns is what they do. And they go backwards from the major patterns to try and find the area where the fire originated. If they get that, if they're good and they work hard and get lucky and they get to that area, now they get on their hands and knees literally with sifters and whisk brooms and things like that, and they're looking for something small that ignited the fire. And they're trying to find a heat source within the origin.
And I would think, I mean, just my brain's telling me, I would think, because I'm putting my brain on some other murders too. Actually, I'm thinking of a triple, and I'm thinking of another one where they set both of these respectively these houses on fire, and they left the cans, the gas can behind. I mean, I'm sure that's not something that they really wanted to take with them and get caught with, getting stopped, leaving the neighborhood or something. Is that something you? Well, first of all, how often do people on fire deaths that are homicide fire deaths, how often do they do that? Do they set the body on fire? I mean, I know I'm not going to hold you to the number. I know that it's you can't give me an exact statistic, but is it becoming more and more prevalent?
Yeah, well, you just covered about 4 subjects there. So, let's go back to one. First of all, most fire deaths, and I'm just going to come up with a number that's reasonable. Most fire deaths, over 85%, are accidental events.
Okay.
In North America, most of them occur in some sort of a residential property of some sort. But with that in mind, we start out every single investigation is this is a murder, this is a murder, this is a murder, this is a murder. If you drill that in your head, this is a probable murder, and you treat it as such, by the end of the day or the end of the week or whatever, you'll downgrade it to what it appropriately is. Maybe it's a suicide. Maybe it's an accident or a misadventure of some sort. And the reality is most fire deaths are not murders, but you have to start out with the murder mindset, which is it could be a murder. Because if you start out, it's an accident, you can't go back the other way. You can't upgrade it because you look really stupid when your chief already put out, yes, we have an accidental Christmas tree fire. And then 2 days later, the coroner calls you and go, hey, bud, you got 5 bullets in your victims here. Now, how are you gonna explain that?
Yeah.
Because that's how long it'll take for them to do the post and figure out that your victims have actually were shot before the fire. All right, so most fire deaths are accidents. The ones that are murders, and you brought up a really good scenario. They left two fuel containers in the scene. Most arsons, especially related to murder, are very obvious. So they're actually easier to deal with than a potential accident. People tend to I don't want to use the word overkill, but overdo the fire. If they can start the fire with a small red Solo cup full of gasoline, they'll get a 5-gallon can. That's even better. And so they'll leave those things for us to find. I don't care how big your fire is, we're going to find them. We'll use scent detectors, dogs. We'll find the fuel source inside of a structure. And then if we sift the floor, we're going to find what's left of that fuel container. They survive even the biggest fires. So, believe it or not, matches survive fires. They survive every fire. They're just really hard to find.
Really?
If somebody used a match and we know where they used it, eventually we'll find it. It's just really, really hard to find. Paper matches do not burn up in fires. Wooden matches don't burn up in fires either. They're there.
Huh.
A butane lighter, if somebody, that's the most common form of ignition, is a small butane lighter nowadays. Of course, we can find those every time.
Right.
Because plastic burns away and the fuel burns away, but that red or that metal cap at the top that says BIC on it will survive forever. And so if we do our job right, we will find those items that started the fire. So any murder that uses fire at some point in the murder, either murder to commit the fire, which is super rare, or usually fire following a murder is more common. Probably what happened in your scenario. The people were already dead or incapacitated.
Yep, both of them.
Yeah, and then fire is set as it's a crime concealment gesture is what it is, anti-forensics. And you hit the nail on the head. It is more common as people are more aware of forensics and how you get caught. So they don't set the fire out of some sexual fantasy, or they don't set the fire out of I don't know. But the reason they set the fire is to get rid of forensics. That's the reason they set the fire. Does it work all the time? No, heck no. We find a lot of stuff that survives fire. And sometimes that's in a structure. Now, if you take that same scenario and put people in a car, they've been killed and placed in a car and set on fire, you have a lot of damage to the body, but you'll still find what caused the fire in that vehicle. You'll find the fuel container. You'll find the Bic lighter. You'll find things like that. And it's just
maybe bullets too.
What's that?
Maybe bullets too. If they
bullets, you have to understand, of course, that soft bullets like lead and copper will melt. But what happens in a vehicle is all the items you're looking for go to the floor. And when a vehicle starts on fire with, say, there's a body in it or two bodies in it, you have the seats burning. You have, of course, the fuel that they started the fire with. And then you have all the plastics on the interior of the car burning.
Yeah.
And you have a good airflow because the windows are there. And you tend to have severe damage from car fires. But when you bring a guy like me out to your scene, I'm going to bring my friends. And I always tell everybody, you got one chance at the crime scene. Every homicide dick knows this. You got one chance to do this scene right. Bring the right people to help you, not the most. I'm not going to bring 30 firefighters in their turnout gear. I'm going to bring 3 or 4 CSI people, really good photographer, and I'm going to bring my buddies from the bomb squad who are going to bring their x-rays with them. We're going to x-ray the entire car. Because after a fire, firemen come, put out the fire. The car cools down again now. It's all dirty and smoky and everything. And whatever was on the floor is now it's sealed in hardened plastic because the plastic that was burning re-solidified after the fire. And it's in under 2 inches of plastic on the floor, and we'll just x-ray the floor and we'll find the car keys, we'll find the cell phone, we'll find a handgun, we'll find a knife. Blood will be underneath it. And so the x-ray will tell us where to look, and we'll just go in there with saws and cut out the area. And sometimes we'll reheat the plastic and melt it and pull out what the evidence we're looking for: shell casings, handguns, things like that. It's a lot of work, but it's a murder. And so, you're going to spend the extra dollar and time on a murder case that you don't on every single fire. So when I teach, I'll teach on how to do car fire investigations. Maybe a body dump. That's another one of my specialties, is where someone's body is taken out into a rural area, dumped and set on fire. And there's predictable traits that happen during things like that on body dumps. And the more the bad guys try to get rid of the body, the more evidence they give us. And we solve the vast majority of our body dumps, even though they're out in the middle of a desert or a mountain range somewhere. And it's a whodunit. There's no cameras around, no cell phones. We solve the majority of those by the DNA that's left on the body. So,
and it's really hard to burn a body, at least from what I've seen. I mean, you can burn parts of it off, but to basically cremate it, and that's pretty tough.
Yeah, you can't do that. The cremation by itself is an unnatural act done at a crematory. And it's in a gas-fired oven that's twice the heat of normal flame. Like if you were to make a campfire, go out there and make a campfire, whatever, the flame temperatures are going to be 1,500 degrees roughly. Just roughly, depends if the wind's blowing. Or if a car's burning, the flame temperatures are 1,500 to 1,700 degrees. If a house is burning, the same temperatures. If you put somebody in a gas-fired, pressurized gas stove, you can get the temperature up to 3,500 degrees. Even still, at the crematoria, after they put you in that for a time period, they grind up your bones and stuff in a grinder. Most places do. So you can't really make somebody go away. That's impossible. But you can, if you burn their body long enough, you can make majority of their tissue go away.
Well, I would assume that you would probably think that it's a good idea, what I'd mentioned earlier, that if you really want to, if for as a homicide detective, you know, I'm of the belief that in that position, we really should be trying to get better at our craft. And this is part of what we deal with. And to do that, to basically collaborate and communicate with the experts in that area, which are the arson guys, whether they're cops or not, to really work with them. And teamwork makes the dream work, or at least helps. And I'll tell you right now, I got to tell you, on one of the murders back in the day, they when I called the arson guys, I said, "Hey, we need to have a meeting with you." And they're like, "Oh, okay, great. We're thrilled that you even called." And I was like, "Well, you know, of course we're going to call. That's what but they've worked a lot of deaths and they didn't get a call. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like crazy. It's like,
that's the nature of
the phone works both ways, guys, you know?
Yeah, that is the nature of the arson homicide dynamic for the last 150 years. Miscommunication, mistrust, a lot of stuff like that. And when people work together, it works really well. And I said, I do teach all the time, and I don't try to teach a homicide detective how to do my job, because I'll do that job and I'm not going to do his job at the scene, but I'll show them why they need an arson investigator there from the start, to, if nothing else, to advise them and on what goes on with the fire department, what goes on with, you know, what the overhaul operations, things like that. So, and again, when I do cold cases, which I do all the time, usually it's a cold case because of a mistake at the scene between maybe the homicide and the arson investigator. So when I teach, it's usually to how to break down those barriers, and I show them case study upon case study upon case study of somebody from the other team not understanding what the other investigator was doing, and it caused bad information to be passed on and things like that. So training through case studies is to me the best way. Yeah, some guys go, well, you're telling war stories, and yeah, sort of, but we tell the ones that we got wrong too, by the way. And that's
well, those are some of those are the best ones to tell, really. Those are the ones where you really learn.
We went down this path for 2 days and we were wrong, and we stopped and we backed up and we started over again, and eventually came to the correct conclusion. And that is police work at its best. Every homicide guy does that, coroners do that, and arson guys do that too. And you're right to reach out to the arson people. They should be at every single fire death, everyone, and as well as you guys should be too. Even if it's an obvious accident, nothing's obvious. Just go there, treat it like a potential murder, downgrade it to what it is once you've got all the data.
Yeah. I've even went to a couple of them that, believe it or not, and this is shocking to me, where they ended up calling me like 3 days later, and they're like, "Yeah, we had this fire death out here and they never called us." And it's, you know, going back, this whole scene is totally changed. And I don't, when I get there, I'm like, what in the heck am I even looking for? They're not even there, you know, kind of a deal. So listen, I want to mention this, www.arsonprofiler.com. That's his website. There is a motherload of well, it talks about him. It talks about what he does. I at least want to mention this. Amanda, throw that picture up of all the books that he's got. I think I sent that to you. He's got a variety of books that he had actually put out there. Yeah, there you go. So just real quick, and by the way, I got to tell you, thank you for the fire investigation book that you sent me. I really appreciate it, and it's very informative from the parts that I've read already. But so let's go through these real quick. What books are we looking at here?
So from left to right, a little fuzzy, but I gave you a bad picture, I guess. The one on the left is about serial arsonists, real cases that I ran into in Los Angeles. And these are the weirdest of the weird and the most bizarre and dangerous ones I've dealt with. The next book is Incendiary Devices. I wrote that specifically for a jury trial I was involved in, but I did a study of 3,500 cases involving incendiary devices, real cases, and I pulled a bunch of data from that. And so now I'm one of the world's experts, I guess, on incendiary device use and exploitation of them, things like that. Well, my two biggest selling books are the brown one is the Arsonist Profiles. That sold thousands and thousands of copies. It's really thick. It's got way too many words in it, but it's all of the various subtypes of arsonists, and there's dozens and dozens of subtypes of arsonists. And the next book in line is Tortured Minds. And yes, I'm aware I spelled the name wrong. That is about 60 some different serial arsonists and some very famous ones, some not so famous, but all the different types of serial arsonists. You mentioned a couple of times my fire death investigation book. That is one of the biggest selling books in all of criminal justice. And it's given out, I don't know, in the tens of thousands of copies. So it is a book made for homicide detectives and coroners investigators. And the last thing that I've been working on is wildland arson cases. If I was smart, which I'm not, I would have got into that 20 years ago because everybody in the wildland sector is rich. There's a lot of money in the private side of that. But this is basically how to actually arrest wildland arsonists. And I write my books about the actual crime of arson because most of the people in the fire investigation business in the private sector do civil fire work, which is a lot of litigation behind accidental fires. And what you don't know is your case, whether you want somebody to look at it or not, will be checked. Your work, Jason, will be checked on every fire death you go to because fire is money. It's huge money. It's the industry behind it in my field is unbelievable. There's some very wealthy private fire investigators, very technical people, very engineering heavy type people, because fire is money. And wildland fire is even more money. It's worth billions to people.
Yeah.
Just imagine the Lahaina fire, what that's worth to lawyers and private investigators. So your work gets checked on every fire death, whether you know it or not, will end up in civil court because somebody that died in a fire is worth money. There's going to be litigation. They're going to blame somebody, somehow.
Yeah.
And people say, well, I don't do civil. Most police and firefighters say, well, I don't do civil cases. That's what I said about 50 civil cases ago.
Yeah.
And I've been drug in, and believe me, the civil attorneys know what the heck they're talking about. They know what to ask you. They ask 10 times more questions than your criminal attorneys. So, because it's money.
If you're a cop out there, because we have a lot of cops that watch this thing from coast to coast and actually throughout the world, Canada, Europe, get this book. It's not that expensive, and it's full of great stuff. Get his book. I'm telling you. And Ed, just to give you a little, hopefully your numbers go up, because this warden's book right here, this is from Philip Parker, one of the wardens that was on previously. His book shot up to number 3 from number 9. So and that was right after our show. So hopefully you're going to sell some books. If you're a citizen, you can buy the books. There's nothing stopping you from buying these books on Amazon if you want. One of the, just real quick, and I know we weren't to talk about arsonists because it's just too big of a hole to go down. But one of the, I was fascinated that I'd heard you say earlier on, not on the show, but earlier on another one, that the most prolific serial arsonist was the son of Sam. Like he was one of the most, like he could, am I right?
Yes.
And so I was shocked by that.
That's back in 1977. David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, nobody knows him for setting fires. He set thousands of fires. He documented 2,500. So that's, nobody's come close to that we know of. I track all the serial arsonists. I've tracked 1,500 of them. And there's been quite a few that have lit over 1,000 fires. There's quite a few, but then the numbers get real small. Son of Sam's documented himself 2,500, and nobody knew him for that, even though he called the fire department all the time, told them who he was, not by his real name. He gave himself a couple of fake names, the Bronx Avenger, but he was a angry serial arsonist that late in life started shooting people, and we all know him as the 44 caliber killer or the son of Sam serial killer.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
He was doing fires way before that.
Any other major serial killers that come to mind that kind of indulged in setting fires? Because I think what you'd said on another deal, and it was that's kind of a misnomer that all these serial killers are playing with fire and stuff.
Well, for a while there, when they were studying serial killers, they did the profilers did notice that quite a few had arson in their background. Arson is an odd crime. Not that many people, do arson, but they found a significant number of serial killers had arson in their background, and so somebody made the unfortunate guess that all serial arsonists will become serial killer. There is a hell of a lot more serial arsonists than there are serial killers. There's tens of thousands of serial arsonists, tens of thousands, and more every day, because they're actually on the increase significantly because of methamphetamines. But there are a few very famous serial killers that were also arsonists or serial arsonists. Jeffrey Dahmer is one that comes to mind. He's the cannibal from Wisconsin, if you remember his story. He was a serial arsonist as well. And there's quite a few more. But their arson was more in their youth, and when they got older, they vented their anger in a different way, obviously towards their serial killing. But I would say percentage-wise that of all the serial killers that we know about, maybe 40% of them are also serial arsonists.
Okay, that's a big number.
It's a big number.
Yeah, that is a big number when you think about it. So let me ask, I want to mention this real quick also. This is the part that was most impressive to me with respect to you, and I want to make sure that we get this out there for the law enforcement individuals throughout this country. If you have a fire death, you have a fire case or anything like that, or an arsonist, you're willing to look at these cases for free, right?
Yeah, free. Don't tell any lawyers that. Yes. I help police and fire agencies and prosecutors every week, probably 2 or 3 times a week. You said I've worked on 46 serial arson cases. I did that while working for LA sheriffs. Since I retired, I've worked on another 60 cases for other agencies, and I've worked on several hundred more fire deaths. And people call me all the time from internet sleuths call me for help. I'll talk to anybody. I'm not a big conspiracy believer. I believe in facts and evidence, of course. Mm-hmm. So people call me. College students call me all the time when they have questions with papers. So I've helped quite a few college students. But I won't help attorneys for free. They have plenty of money, so they can pay for it. But most public agencies, especially on cold cases or old cases or unsolved, I help them at least twice a week now still. And I like doing it. They send me the stuff. I go through it. I've done probably 40 or 50 cases in Canada, all through the US, France, Italy, Greece, Colombia, South Africa, all kinds of places.
So if you're out there and you're listening anywhere in the country, because like I said, we've got a ton of cops from coast to coast, from California to Virginia, all over the country, believe me, that tune into this. I'm amazed that they do, but it's because of people like you, Ed, that come on this show, that you're letting them know who you are and what you can do for us. And I appreciate that. And I'm just in awe. I've been awestruck by you and your knowledge this whole episode, and just from what I've seen on other stuff and researching you. I can't thank you enough. I want to thank everybody. We got to get off here. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I didn't mention you, but believe me, I look at you guys over here, from Jackie to Phyllis and all the OGs that are here each and every week. Thank you so much. I want you all to have a very safe New Year's Day. And finally, I'm going to tell you, next week's episode is going to be a very special guest. It's going to be Mike Elam. This guy is probably the #1 expert when it comes to Buford Pusser, the Walking Tall case. This case is about ready to hit Netflix. Well, I think it's going to be hitting Netflix, I think, in the near future. And this guy is going to be awesome. He knows everything about that case and stuff that you would be shocked that he talks about. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Ed. I appreciate you, buddy. And I really hope that we can talk about serial arsonists next. Seriously. All right. Hey, listen, take us out, Amanda, and everybody be safe, and thank you for being here.